Hey, what's up, everybody? It's DP Rowell here. Today I'm talking with Connie B. Dowell. Did I pronounce that correctly, the last name?
Yes.
Okay. I figured I did because my last name is Rowell, but a lot of Rowell or Rowell. So I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Dowell. But she's the author of the Orchid chapter. Did I pronounce that correctly?
The Orchid Caper.
The Orchid Caper. Okay, I don't know. I threw an H in there for some reason. Caper, The Poison in All of Us, and You Can Love Writing, a nonfiction book for writers. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, and yes, Dowell is right. I get the same kind of mispronunciations. Hello,
really?
Miss Dowell. Hello, Miss Dowell.
Yeah, me, it's funny because the name Powell, like, I never hear that name get mispronounced. It's always...
No, never.
Yeah, but then as soon as you change the first letter, it's like, that's what to do. I mean, a Rowell makes a little sense. When you look at the name, I guess Dowell makes a little sense, but I immediately thought Dowell just because my last name, or Dowell.
Yeah.
So I know that you are a history fan. I was curious, how has your your interest in studying in history bled into your stories as a writer?
My first fiction book, novella, is set in 1918. So that history pretty much inspired the story. And it's a story, it's a YA historical mystery of two teenage girls, and the most prominent suffragist in their small town is found murdered. And they are trying to find the killer before more outspoken women die. And so it's that history and suffrage and women's rights of that period really informed the story.
Yeah, that sounds like it took a lot of research, like the history. So are you saying that the book was inspired because you were studying history, or you researched history and got interested into it because of the novel?
Well, I've always loved history, and I minored in history in college. I had this idea for a novel and then did a lot more study in that period, because I'd actually focused much more on medieval history and culture in college. So very different period, but I found a new inspiration in early 20th century. Okay,
cool. That sounds awesome. Yeah, definitely. That novel definitely would require a lot of knowledge of history and research. I feel like fantasy authors like get lucky sometimes, like me, because you can kind of get away with it with not as much research sometimes because you're just making up a world. But generally speaking, most fantasy authors do a lot of research into their book. But so I mean, I guess that's not entirely accurate.
That's true, and a knowledge of history, I would imagine, could really be beneficial for a fantasy author, because you're coming up with this whole culture and this whole world that doesn't really exist, and seeing how real cultures and real societies have interacted and have developed would help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I kind of want to take back everything I said now. I just feel like sometimes there's things like I don't know what I'm trying to describe right now. There's so many things that are made up in a fantasy novel that people aren't going to be like, you got that wrong, because it's but there are a lot of things, like studying history, like you said, definitely is extremely important and beneficial in writing a fantasy novel.
Yeah, it is. And to kind of go back to that point of like worrying about getting it wrong, which is a big worry in historical fiction, but you don't often have to be quite as detailed as you think. It's really easy to get like caught up on like, would she have worn a hat of that style? And very few people, you can cover, you can guess a little bit, because very few people are gonna track down that particular make of hat or whatever. Like I've got my own personal blooper is I gave my heroine a Harley Davidson, a 1917 Harley Davidson. She couldn't possibly have had that particular motorcycle. And I learned that about 6 months after publishing the book. That, yeah, Harley didn't, all of the motorcycles went overseas that year. And it was too soon after the war for her to have bought one that somehow made it back to the US.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that there's like, it's easy to get caught. That honestly makes, because I'm terrified of historical fiction. I think it's really cool. I'm interested in it, but I don't think I'd ever want to write it just because of how much research. So it does make sense though that it's easy to get caught up in that, and that kind of makes me feel a little more open to looking into that. But so if you were to go back then and redo it, would you fix that motorcycle thing, or do you think it's fine in the story the way it is?
Well, as an independent author, I could go back and fix that.
It's true.
But I'm not going to, because it's a really small detail. I harped on about the green color of the motorcycle a couple of times, and 1917, I did know this. This was the first year that they made that they issued it that olive green color. So it really couldn't possibly have been anything other than a 1917 motorcycle, which couldn't have been in that place at that time. So I could go back and edit all the instances I mentioned the color. I could go back and put it in about, some other person painting it that color, but it seems like a really small detail. At some point I'll just update my website with like a bloopers page. And I'm lifting a page from another writer, I want to say like Kathleen Emerson, that was her name, who writes historical mysteries for adults, and she has a bloopers page on her website of all the things that she's gotten wrong over the years. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of a funny little tidbit that you can give readers. Oh, by the way, the motorcycle from.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. That's a really cool way to look at it. I think that definitely is a big stress reliever for new writers who are wondering, like, how much can I get away with? Like, what if because that's honestly a big fear of mine. I constantly have thoughts pop up in my head on my book, and I'm like, what if I got that wrong? Like, what if I messed that up? And so it's, like you're saying, obviously successful writers miss things all the time. And I think it also speaks to the point that you can never research too much.
Yeah. You can never research much, but you can get bogged down in research and never write. I spent a long time researching, probably too much time before I started writing. I had that fear, and I spent too long before starting on the second book in the series, which I'm still working on, because I felt like I needed that same minutia. I needed to be completely, in my mind, set in 1919 before I could start writing it. But I didn't, you don't always know the questions that you need to ask until you start writing the story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've also found that to be true. I don't usually get bogged down in research. That's probably one of my weaknesses. I could probably stand to do a little bit more research, but I get bogged down in the world building, where I'll just try so hard to know every detail I possibly can. At some point, you got to actually write the book.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see how research can be that, especially for historical fiction, can sort of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're getting at. Yeah, the pressure is often historical fiction in that you don't have to make up every detail of the world. It's already happened, but it's on in that you want to get it right enough that you're not going to get lots of call-outs.
Yeah, like someone who's reading the book who knows a lot about history is like, oh, she got this right, oh, that motorcycle though, you got to throw the whole book out. Like,
yeah, but like, I'm all the people who have read my books, no one has ever pointed it out, and of the people who know this fact, I'm like, the cross section between those two right now is me. I am the only person who has read my book and knows this fact.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's
as far as I know.
Yeah, I think that says a lot about that. Definitely, that's cool. So, kind of moving on to something else. I don't know what I was thinking I wanted to say, But I read on your website something that you said that I thought was really awesome. You were talking about writing strong characters, and you mentioned that strength isn't the absence of flaws. And I thought that was just a really awesome quote, because I think character flaws often get overlooked as a really important part of character development. And so I was wondering if you could just kind of touch on that a little bit more and speak to the importance of writing character flaws.
Sure. That is, I'm impressed that you dug back through that stuff, because I haven't done much blogging in like years. But yeah, the strength isn't the absence of flaws, because if you got a character with no flaws, there's really nowhere for them to go in the story. Are you just reading about a static person who might change the world around them, which is one kind of story. But even so, a person who doesn't have any flaws, they're kind of boring. They're too perfect. It's hard to relate to a person who doesn't have any flaws. And when we're talking about characters who don't have any flaws, are you familiar with the term Mary Sue?
Yes, I am familiar.
Yes. So
yeah.
For those who don't know, Mary Sue is a term that seems to have originated in fan fiction, where like a person sort of author insertion, but made themselves all perfect, and everyone in the world loves them, and they're annoying.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got to give a character somewhere to go, somehow to get better or change as a person.
Yeah.
Or if you're writing a tragedy, get worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even the fact that tragedies sell, that tragedies are books that people enjoy to read, I think speaks to how important character flaws can be. And I've always pointed out that I think the best stories out there are either stories about someone who had really well written character flaws, or someone in the story, like maybe the hero's guide or whatever, had really well written character flaws. So, for instance, in Star Wars, I feel like more people like Han Solo than they do Luke Skywalker, because Han Solo has more flaws, but he's still likable. And so that's a balance to walk, to write a character who messes up, who does things that you're not supposed to do, but it still has redeemable qualities.
Yeah. Han Solo definitely has more flaws, and although I suppose you could say Luke's flaw in the beginning is he's just kind of naive and a little bit annoying.
Yeah.
And Han is out there doing stuff. A character who's active is a lot easier to root for too.
That's a very good point too. Yeah. I don't know what else to say to that. Yeah. So what do you think as a writer, and also as an indie author, some of the biggest challenges you've had to face and overcome?
Let's see. I think as a writer, the biggest challenge to overcome is for any writer to get to a point where you're ready to write something that is book length. And to get to a point where you recognize the first thing that you've written that is book length is not publishable. And you need to write a bunch more before you can release something. The wonderful thing about the rise of indie publishing and the technology that's made it possible is that more voices can be heard and more stories can be told that were often kind of screened out because people thought they weren't marketable. But the flip side is that anybody can publish, and when anybody can publish, and they don't always have those checks and balances of doing that. So I would tell any new writer to write lots and lots and lots, and you think the first thing you did is wonderful, well, write 3 more and see if you still feel that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I can personally attest to that. So I watched, when I was really getting into writing and I wanted to actually write a whole book down, and I made that a goal that this is something I'm going to do. I was looking up advice and tips from authors and everything, I came across an author called Scott Sigler. I'm not sure if you've heard of him or not, but this video series on So You Want to Be a Writer. And his advice was to write a really bad book first, and that the goal of it was just to get it finished. And I found this study online. I wish I could, if I find it again, I'll leave a link in the description. I'll try to find it. I don't know if I could because it was a while ago, but I don't know how accurate this is, but it seems the numbers make sense to me. But it's something like 97% of people who try to write a book never finish, which that stat makes sense to me. It's believable. I don't know how they judge that necessarily. And so I thought about that, and I was like, man, that means if you just finish one draft of a book, you're in the top 3% of writers in the world. Which is, I think, really, really says a lot. And it's like you said, you think it's going to be good even as you're writing it. But his advice was to write the book, set it aside for 6 months, and then write something else. And then when you're done with that book, go back and read the first one. And you're going to see all of the mistakes that you made. And you're going to be like, I can't believe I thought this was good. And that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't quite do that. I was actually about halfway through my first book when I came across that series. And I thought, you know what, when I'm done with this, that was intended to be a series, but when I'm done with this, I'm going to write something else and come back. And I did that, and I came back, and I was like, ooh, this is rough. And I'm so glad I made the decision not to publish it. And it's like you said, too, because of the indie publishing, anybody can publish. And so it's really tempting to jump the gun and try to publish something that isn't that great before you're ready.
Yeah, it's... I heard it described to me like that all writers have an apprenticeship, either that you're writing and working and studying for a long time before you're traditionally published, or you write and work and study for a long time before you self-publish, or your apprenticeship, if you are a little too hasty, goes out into the world, and then you have more problems.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I will say, though, if any authors are listening to this that maybe have done that the best way, I still believe, to learn is to do. And so by finishing a book, first off, if that stat is true, you're in the top 3% already. There, you made a mistake, and you're going to learn from it and keep growing. And so I think the important thing is that you just keep at it, even if you did do something like that. Yeah,
you can always unpublish.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Now, does Amazon, I've heard different things about this. I've never done it, so I don't know for sure, but does Amazon actually take your book off if you unpublish, or does it just say out of stock and leave your book out?
It depends. If you were ebook only and you unpublish, then it is zilcho gone from the world other than the people who've bought it. If you have a paperback, there's always going to be something floating out there as a secondhand copy. Or at least listed by a reseller who claims they have a secondhand copy. So you can never fully unpublish a paperback, but it can no longer be in stock, and it might be like a ridiculous price or something.
Okay, that's great to know. I never knew that distinction, because I'd heard different things about that, and I'd never figured out why exactly that was. But yeah, that's really good to know if someone's thinking about publishing. It's like, oh, if you publish a bad book, you can just take it right off. I think that's good incentive to just publish an ebook for your first book too.
Yeah, that's true. Unless you've really, really vetted that first book and made sure that it's a quality that you don't mind being out in the world potentially forever.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the fact that like you can try to fight this, but all ebooks get pirated. All of them.
Yeah.
You can take it off of Amazon, you can take it off of Kobo and Barnes & Noble and wherever else you put it, but you can't take it down from pirate sites. You just can't chase them all and make them all stop.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about the internet and the way it's going now. But I have faith that there will be of course, I don't think most authors starting out care that much. I think most authors want their books to be read by anyone, so they don't really care that their books are being pirated. If they do, I think it's a small percentage. I could be wrong about that. I don't care that much right now because I want my books to get out there, and if people are reading them, that's good news to me. But I do at the same time think that in the future there will be something that will kind of solve that problem. I don't know what it'll be. One reason I think that is because that was really streaming. Pirating music was really popular in like the mid 2000s to late 2000s, like LimeWire and Napster before it was legal, and streaming happened and came around and sort of kind of solved that problem. I don't know if it was just streaming. It was a mix of different things, and so now that's not really as big of an issue as it used to be. And so I'm hoping that the same thing will start to happen for indie authors, that someone will come up with an idea to solve that problem. But who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Although that's an interesting issue to think about, as programs like Kindle Unlimited and those sort of subscription reading programs get more and more customers, because every other form of media, subscription has been the way to go. It's sort of streaming music, Netflix, Hulu, what have you. And when you read about what people in the music industry have thought about streaming, it seems like it's changed their business model a lot of how they make their money, because the streaming payments are very small. So that's something I hope doesn't happen for authors.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think there were a lot of authors. I think it already has kind of happened, because I went into Kindle Unlimited when they already had this, but from my understanding, Kindle Unlimited used to pay authors differently than they do now, and now they pay them by like the amount of pages of their book that are being read.
Yeah, I think there used to be like a flat rate for borrows, and now it's pages read, because people were making a lot of money off of very short books, and that changed the way that their business worked once they changed it to pages read.
Okay. I heard that there was some different change, and that authors were a little bit upset about it, but I didn't know I didn't know what the difference was, because that had already been implemented when I published my book.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the ways that you stay motivated to write?
So I don't find motivation as much of a problem these days as finding time in which I'm not like constantly interrupted, because I've got 2 toddlers. So yeah. When I get that time, I'm really motivated, because I'm like, this is my time for me and I get to write in it. But it's more about like getting that time and staying motivated. I guess there's more of a motivation issue when I can't have quiet time, when I can't have time that they're napping or doing something else, and I have to write while fielding different things.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge I'm still working on.
Well, on that note, what are some of the things that you've done, or that you're finding does work to help find time to write in the middle of all that?
I'm trying to capture the little pockets, to kind of be always ready and capture those little pockets of time when I'm like, okay, they're playing blocks right now, and I can get just a few minutes here, or to have something with me in the car. And so if we're driving somewhere and they fall asleep, and if I can time it, great, I'll go through the Starbucks drive-through and grab a coffee and write while I can, and then drive off home.
But you parked though, right?
Yeah, parked.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, Starbucks. I'm kind of treating them sometimes like they're Sonic, and you're like, I park. Yeah, and I'm working on getting better with dictation, because then I can do this one-handed and with more speed than, well, I got to whip out the computer and I got to sit there and type, and I can just talk into my iPad, which has been the most useful thing so far.
Okay.
its native dictation has turned out to be better than the Dragon app that I got on my phone, which was actually pretty terrible. And I think I'm going to cancel that subscription.
Yeah. I've never used dictation before. To me, it feels like cheating, but I mean, and you're, obviously in your situation, that makes a lot of sense. So I've never like used dictation before, but I would have to, so that's the thing is like, I think when you get kind of in a situation where you have to find time to write, you just kind of have to do what works, and you have to pull yourself out of these, like, it's easy to get into these little boxes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Kind of like, this is just the way that I do it. It's the way I'm used to it. So yeah, like finding time to do, you're just going to get the words down, like no matter what. Like, if you got time, you're going to talk into your iPad. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Do you have like a favorite book of all time?
It is so hard to pick a favorite book of all time. So whenever I'm asked that question, I pick like my last favorite book, the favorite book I read most recently. And I am not going to pronounce this author's name right, and I can't 100% remember how it's spelled. But the book is called A Spark of White Fire, and it's a science fiction with fantasy elements, a YA, and it's based on Indian mythology and folklore, and it's really interesting, and it's really a page turner with lots of political intrigue and really gripping, active characters.
That's cool. I'm realizing now that doing interviews that I'm getting all these book recommendations that I'm like, we're gonna have time for. That's the best and worst thing about being a reader is you're always reading, but you can never read everything you want to read. Like, there's always the list of books that I'm trying to read that I can never get to. I have like 3 books on my bedstand that I'm reading at one time, just because I want to read them all and I can't decide which one I want to read.
Yeah, it's like it's the double-edged sword. It's so wonderful that there are so many awesome books in the world that I could never actually finish reading them all, but at the same time, I can never finish reading them all.
Yeah.
And it makes you, I don't know, but it makes me a much more discerning reader when you don't have enough time to read everything you want. If I'm not engaging with a book or a character, I put it down much sooner than I used to.
Yeah, that's something I found to be true too, is that I've noticed that I recently picked up that I will be like, I'll be forcing myself to try and read a book I don't want to read because I just kind of feel like I need to finish this book. But I kind of given that up, especially because there's so many books that I want to read where it's like, if I'm not interested in it, I'm not invested in it, why waste my time doing it? So like, that's one of the things that pigeonhole people into not liking reading, is that they just force themselves to read things they don't want to read.
Yeah, pretty much. If you're not having fun, nobody's making you read this. This isn't school anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I talked about with the other author, is that in school they would like force you to read things you don't want to read, and it kind of sets you up to not like reading, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
One last question I got here before we close this off. If you could go back in time and give yourself advice before you published your first book ever, what advice would that be?
It would be spend more time learning how to market instead of, I'll publish this book and figure it out somehow. Because it takes a really long time to figure that out.
Yes, I am finding that out the hard way right now. So I am the past you right now. Advice. I definitely learned the hard way that marketing your book starts way before you ever publish your first book. And I've already published my first book, so we'll see how that goes.
Well, I mean, you can start out at the gate with the book. So it's 2 different approaches, but yeah. I spent a lot of time just kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what stuck, and it wasn't necessarily the most efficient way to go about it.
Yeah, I found that to be true too. And the thing about it is at least I had like I did do a lot of research on marketing before I did publish the first book, but I didn't pay enough attention to it, I guess. So I do know that you have to find a target market and find out what your audience is. And even when you know the right things to do, there's still a lot of banging your head against the wall, it feels like, because it's just something that you're new to. It's something that you're not going to get right off.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of time. It takes as much time, I would say, to learn as it does to learn how to write your book, to learn how to market your book.
Yeah, easily. So something that you've got to learn and to study. And if you're an indie author, you've got to study even more.
Yeah. So what are, just on that note, I guess I'm going to ask just one more question. What are some tips and strategies that have kind of helped you since then?
Things change a lot, and what works is pretty different depending on the kind of book that you have. And my first book was nonfiction. It was about academic writing and fiction. So lots and lots of the strategies I read about and lots of the opportunities for marketing at the time were really geared towards fiction, and none of that worked for that book. And to be honest, that book, it was in a niche. The only way I knew how to market it at that time was to content market and to keep posting like lots of blog posts. And it was something that I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. And I kind of put that on hold until going into Amazon advertising, and I've really just played with that. That's the only way I know how to market this book without driving myself crazy. So yeah, it just learn the way that your kind of book gets marketed. Listen to a lot of marketing podcasts. So that was the best way for me to learn, because not only do you learn the basics of what to do, but what's changing as it changes, because it's updated real time. You can look at blog posts on the internet from years and years ago. Those strategies might not work today.
Yeah, that is a very relevant point. I have actually found that to be true, where I'll look back, I'll be doing something that a blog post gave me advice to do, and then I'll look back and realize, oh, this was written 4 years ago, and that's not even around.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too, I think you kind of touched on it, is you said, if I heard you correctly, that marketing on AMS ads was the only way you knew how to market it without driving yourself crazy.
For that particular book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
for that particular book.
By that, do you mean that you were trying a whole bunch of different strategies and trying to do all of it was making you go crazy, or?
What I mean was, I wanted to spend time writing fiction and be known as a fiction author, and I was splitting myself in two, trying to content market for academic writing and also try to market fiction. I did not want to maintain a blog about academic writing. I did not want to be doing guest blog posts. I mean, not like I don't ever want to do that, but I didn't want to be constantly marketing in a field where I've been a stay-at-home mom for 3 years. I'm not even working in that field right now.
Yeah. So
I didn't want to keep that up for. So ads actually revived a book that I decided my life determined I couldn't market the way it needed to be marketed. Yeah,
okay, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think that speaks to someone who is just starting out. If a benefit for them is to really study the type of genre they want to write, because it may be more than just the type of genre you like to read. It may be things that you have to do in that genre to market it. For instance, I am learning now that I write upper middle grade, which is kind of sits on a line between middle grade and young adult, but it's mostly middle grade. I'm learning that it's a good bit of it's paperback, not really ebooks. It depends. There are plenty of middle grade authors who are successful in ebooks, but getting into schools and doing things like that and libraries is more effective on a regular basis, or generally speaking, is what I mean to say, for middle grade authors. And that's been kind of a struggle for me. So that's something I could have definitely studied more before I published my first book.
Yeah, that's a unique challenge for middle grade and lower authors, that the paperback and school visits and that kind of stuff is much more crucial. But it also seems really exciting. I think doing a school visit would be really fun to do at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it would be really fun to do, but I've never done it before, so it's requiring a lot more research and a lot more thing on my part than I had planned at the beginning, which is totally fine with me. But if I had prepared better, I could have set myself up better for where I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you do stuff and then you learn.
Yeah, it goes back to the point we made earlier that the best way to learn is to keep doing and to keep tweaking and keep changing things, and to not give up.
Yep.
Well, that was pretty much all the questions that I had for you. Do you have anything coming out that you want to talk about or promote?
Sure. So the next book in the historical mystery series, the Emmy and Dessa Mysteries, is called Dead Man's Jazz, and it's set in 1919 Savannah, and starts with a missing jazz musician. And so I'm hoping to release that book this spring, so probably in late March or early April. I don't have a pre-order up yet, but if you like early 20th century stuff, then check out the first book, The Poison in All of Us. And my husband for Christmas actually made me these snazzy like prototypes of hardbacks. So
cool. That's awesome.
So at some point I am going to get like actual hardbacks because Ingram Spark can now do hardbacks. They won't be quite as nice as the ones he made me. There's like leather and everything on the cover, but this is what the cover looks like, at least but in paperback.
Awesome. So you said it's going to be set in Savannah, Georgia?
Yeah, so the first one was set in North Georgia in a made-up small town, and the second one is in Savannah.
Okay, cool. My brother went to college there in Savannah for a little while, so I've been down there a few times. It's a really cool place. It's got a lot of haunted stories behind it.
Yeah, a lot of haunting, a lot of interesting history in Savannah.
Yeah, that sounds cool. It sounds exciting. Well, Connie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, it's been a great chat.